The boy couldn't have been older than 6. Alone, barefoot, his tiny hands clutching a crumpled candy wrapper as if it were a treasure. He stood near the entrance of the community park where Elena took her daily walk. It was late afternoon, the golden sun barely touching the horizon, and the park had started to empty. Elena slowed down when she saw him. Her instincts, that deep pull of empathy she often tried to suppress, lit up inside her like a flare. He looked up at her with wide tear-glossed eyes. "I can't find my mom," he whispered. And just like that, her heart cracked in two. She knelt in front of him, careful not to spook him. "Hey, it's okay. I'm Elena. What's your name?" "Noah." He murmured, voice trembling. "Okay, Noah, let's find your mom together." "All right." She offered her hand. He took it with the unthinking trust only children had. Elena checked the area, asked around, but no one seemed to recognize the boy. She brought him to the small security station by the parking lot, but the guard is out for his usual coffee. Run. Typical. Her phone had almost no battery left. She crouched to Noah's level again. "Do you remember anything? What your mom was wearing? Her name?" She had glasses and long dark hair. "Her name is," he stopped biting his lip. "Juliet." The name was soft on his tongue, almost reverent. Elena smiled reassuringly. "That's a beautiful name." After another 30 minutes of walking and searching through every bench and path, Elena finally spotted a woman in a fitted blazer and black jeans. Panic etched across her face. When their eyes met, the woman's breath caught. "Noah!" she gasped, rushing forward. He broke from Elena's side and ran into the woman's arms. The woman dropped to her knees, embracing him tightly, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh my God, baby. I was going crazy." Elena watched the reunion, something warm and aching blooming in her chest. Juliet looked up then, eyes locking with Elena's. She was breathtaking. There was no other word for it. Elegant, sharp-featured, with an intensity in her gaze that seemed to pin Elena to the spot. "You found him," Juliet said, standing slowly with Noah clinging to her side. Elena nodded, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her stomach. "He found me, really?" Juliet's expression softened, and for a second something passed between them. A flicker, a current, "Can I buy you a coffee?" To say thank you, Juliet asked, brushing a lock of hair from her face. Elena hesitated. She didn't do this. She didn't get involved with strangers, much less magnetic, possibly two perfect strangers. But something about the way Juliet looked at her made it hard to say no. Sure, they walked to a small cafe just outside the park. Noah sat quietly with a muffin, still glued to his mom's side. Juliet kept stealing glances at Elena. "You were really kind to him," she said, her voice softer now, more personal. "Most people would have walked past." Elena shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. He just needed someone to stop. "Well, I'm grateful you were that someone." There was a pause thick with something unspoken. Juliet leaned in slightly, her tone changing. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Elena blinked. "Should I?" Juliet gave a half smile, a little amused. "No, it's actually kind of nice." Elena tilted her head. "Who are you?" "Juliet Mercier," she said simply. And Elena froze. That name Mercier, as in the family that owned almost half the commercial real estate in the city. As in the quiet billionaires no one ever saw in tabloids. Oh, Elena breathed. "Yeah. Oh." Juliet laughed softly. "Does it change anything?" Elena shook her head. "No, but it explains the shoes." They both laughed. Noah smiled, watching them like he understood something neither of them had said aloud. As the sun dipped lower and the light turned amber and soft, Juliet touched Elena's hand gently. "You saved the most important person in my life today," she said. "I don't forget things like that." Elena met her gaze, that flicker in her chest, igniting into something warmer. "You're welcome." They sat there until long after the coffee cooled. When they finally stood to leave, Juliet said, "I'd like to see you again." "I'd like that," Elena replied, her voice quieter than usual, more open. As they parted, something in the air shifted. The day had started like any other. Now something was beginning, and neither of them could stop it. The next time Elena saw Juliet, it was at the cafe again, but this time Juliet was alone. She was already sitting at a corner table by the window, sunlight catching in her dark hair, glasses perched delicately on the bridge of her nose as she read from her phone. The elegance she carried wasn't performative. It lived in her body like second nature. Elena stood still for a second, just watching her until Juliet looked up. That smile, subtle, warm like a secret shared, was enough to make Elena forget how to breathe. "You came," Juliet said, rising slightly from her seat. "Of course I came," Elena replied, heart hammering as she slid into the chair opposite. "You invited me." "Yes, but sometimes people say yes to be polite." "I don't do polite unless I mean it." Juliet laughed quietly, eyes lingering a second too long. "I'm starting to like that about you." They talked, and this time it was different. The conversation danced around Noah briefly. How he'd been more attached than usual since getting lost. How he asked about Elena the night before, but quickly it shifted into deeper territory. Childhoods, books, travel, what made them angry, what made them dream. Every time Elena thought the moment would break, some awkward silence or forced topic, Juliet surprised her with a question so precise it felt like she'd known Elena for years. "Why don't you date anyone?" Juliet asked, not invasive, just curious. Elena paused. "Because I've dated the kind of people who want you to shrink for them, and I refuse to get smaller." Juliet's eyes softened like velvet. "Don't ever shrink. Not for anyone." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a compliment. It was reverence. And it hit Elena in a place she hadn't let anyone near in a long time. Their fingers touched by accident when Elena reached for a coffee. Neither of them pulled away. "I don't usually do this," Juliet murmured. "What is this?" Elena asked. "Feel like I'm 16 again." Elena smirked. "You were that charming at 16. I was lonely at 16. A quiet pass between them. Not awkward, just full. Full of everything neither had said yet. "I like being near you," Juliet said finally, fingers grazing Elena's knuckles with unbearable gentleness. "You don't feel noisy," Elena chuckled softly. "No one's ever said that to me. You make space." And I didn't realize how much I needed someone who could do that. Elena's throat tightened. "Juliet, this isn't casual for you, is it?" Juliet looked at her without blinking. Not even close. The weight of that answer lingered in the air between them. And then Elena said the one thing she'd been holding back. "I don't want to be a passing phase in your life." Juliet leaned in, voice lower now. "I don't let phases hold. My son when he's crying, or make me laugh like I used to, or look at me like they see all of me and don't flinch." Elena's breath hitched. "You barely know me. And still, here I'm telling you things I never say out loud." That night, Juliet drove Elena home, not because she had to, but because neither of them wanted the night to end. When they reached the building, Juliet parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence. Elena turned to her. "You want to come up?" It wasn't suggestive. It was tentative and offering. Juliet smiled with something fragile and strong at once. "I do, but not tonight. I want to remember this part of us, too." Elena nodded, swallowing the strange ache in her chest. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Call me in the morning," Juliet said. "So, I know it wasn't a dream." Elena opened the car door, then paused. She turned back, leaning in slowly, her hand cuped Juliet's cheek, thumb brushing gently across the skin there. "You're not a dream," she whispered, and then she kissed her. Soft, sure, no desperation, just promise. Juliet's hand wrapped around Elena's wrist, holding her there for a breath longer than necessary. When Elena finally stepped out of the car and walked away, Juliet rested her forehead against the steering wheel, exhaling like she hadn't breathed properly in years. Elena wasn't sure what time Juliet woke up, but by 7:03 a.m., a text is already waiting on her phone. Juliet, good morning. Still not a dream. Elena smiled into her pillow, biting her lip like a teenager. Elena, then let's not wake up yet. She stared at the screen for a moment longer than necessary. The simple exchange sinking into her chest with a warmth that felt dangerous. She hadn't felt this in years. Not excitement, not lust, something gentler, something that asked her to stay. The week passed in slow, bright pulses. They talked almost every night, sometimes for an hour, sometimes until the early hours when only half-truths and unguarded laughter filled the space between them. Juliet told her about Paris, where she was born but barely remembered, about her parents, sharp and cold, who never learned how to love gently, about building her life from the ground up, even when the world thought she'd had it all handed to her. And Elena talked to about her late grandmother's garden where she learned silence wasn't always empty, about her fear of becoming invisible, about how love had always been something she gave more than received. And somewhere in all those conversations, they started missing each other even when they were only hours apart. So when Juliet invited Elena to dinner, just the two of us, no staff. I'll cook and you'll pretend it's not terrible. Elena said, yes, without hesitation. She arrived just past 7. The house was quiet, warm, filled with the smell of roasted vegetables and something burning faintly in the background. You cooked? Elena asked, teasing, slipping off her coat as Juliet took it with a smirk. I tried, she replied. But if I accidentally kill you, I know a good lawyer. The table was already set. Simple, elegant. 2 candles flickered between there. Plates and a soft playlist hummed in the background. Jazz, low and sultry. Wine? Julia asked. Elena nodded. God, yes. They clinketed glasses, eyes locked just a second too long. Dinner was edible. Barely. But Elena said nothing because Juliet's effort was more delicious than the food could ever be. And when Juliet reached across the table to wipe, out of sauce from Elena's lip with her thumb, the air shifted. You're looking at me like you want to say something, Juliet murmured. I'm trying not to, Elena confessed. Juliet leaned in. Why? Because if I say it, I might fall. Juliet's breath caught. And if I catch you, Elena's heart thudded. Then I'm already yours. The space between them disappeared. Juliet stood slowly, walking around the table with deliberate grace, as if savoring every inch between them. She stopped beside Elena, extended a hand. Come with me. Elena took it. They moved through the house quietly until they reached a room bathed in warm lamplight, books lining the walls, a velvet sofa in the center. Juliet sat and pulled Elena gently onto her lap, their faces inches apart. I can't remember the last time I wanted someone this badly and this softly at the same time. Juliet whispered, her hands resting on Elena's thighs. Elena looked down at her, that same dangerous tenderness blooming again. I'm scared of how much I want this. Juliet touched her cheek. Wanting isn't weakness. No, Elena said, brushing her nose gently against Juliet's, but needing is. Juliet kissed her, not hungrily, not desperately, just completely. Like every inch of hesitation was being rewritten by something deeper. Elena slid her hands around Juliet's neck, drawing her closer, feeling the shape of a woman who didn't just want her, but saw her. The kiss grew fuller, richer, mouths moving in slow worship. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more, and let me know in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story? So far, your feedback makes all the difference. When they broke, both of them breathless, Elena leaned her forward against Juliet's. I'm not used to this, Elena admitted. Being wanted this way, Juliet pulled her close again. Then let me teach. You... They stayed like that, pressed together on that velvet couch for what felt like hours, kissing, talking, letting fingers linger. Every now and then, Juliet would whisper something into her ear. You feel like peace. You make me forget the weight I carry. I've waited so long to feel like this. And Elena let herself fall piece by piece into the arms of a woman who didn't ask her to shrink, didn't rush her, and didn't need her to prove she was worthy of love. That night, when Juliet walked her to the door, their goodbye kiss was slower, fuller. Elena's hands trembled slightly as they lingered on Juliet's face. I don't know what this is yet, Elena whispered. Juliet kissed her knuckles. It's real. That's all I care about. Elena couldn't stop thinking about the way Juliet had kissed her. There was something haunting about it, how gentle it had been, how certain. That night had carved itself into her skin like a memory she didn't want to fade. But as the days passed, something shifted. It started subtly. Fewer messages, slower replies, a missed call here. A sorry meeting ran long there. Elena didn't want to be paranoid. She'd promised herself she wouldn't be that person. But when affection came wrapped in silence, it was hard not to wonder. By Thursday, Elena had decided she wasn't going to spiral. She was going to ask directly without games, without pretending she didn't care. She texted, "Can we talk tonight?" The reply came, fast. "Yes, come over." Julia opened the door barefoot in a soft black sweater and leggings, her hair loose around her face. She looked tired, beautiful, but tired. "Hey," she said softly. "Hi," Elena answered, stepping inside. "I brought you something." She held out a paper bag. Salted caramel brownies. "Made them myself." Juliet smiled with something that looked like both gratitude and guilt. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to." Juliet took the bag, set it down on the counter, and turned back to her. "You're upset." "Not upset," Elena said, meeting her gaze. "Just confused." We kissed. "We opened something, and then you started pulling away." Juliet didn't deny it. She walked over to the window, arms crossed. "It's not because I don't want you." "God, Elena, it's the opposite." Elena waited, quiet, patient. "You make me feel things I don't know how to handle." Julia admitted, "This isn't casual, and I'm not used to letting people in, especially not someone who sees right through me." "So what?" Elena said gently, "You push me away so you can stay safe. I push you away because I'm terrified you'll leave once you realize I'm not easy to love." The words cracked in the air like glass breaking. Elena walked over slowly, standing behind her. "I'm not afraid of your edges, Juliet, but I need you to meet me halfway. I can't do this alone." Juliet turned around then, and for a moment, all the walls she held up so tightly seemed to collapse. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered. Elena stepped closer, then stopped running from it. Their lips met again, but this time it wasn't new. It was grounding, familiar, a confirmation. Juliet pressed her forehead to Elena's after the kiss. Her voice low. "Stay tonight?" Elena nodded. "I was hoping you'd ask." They didn't rush. They lay on the couch under a blanket, limbs tangled, hearts exposed. Juliet talked more than she ever had before. About the night her ex left without a word. About the coldness she inherited from her mother, and how long she'd spent trying not to become her. Elena listened, holding her hand the whole time, only speaking when she felt Juliet's voice falter. "You're not her," Elena whispered once. "You're not broken, you're just scared. I hate how much you see." "And I love how much you hide," Elena answered, brushing her lips over Juliet's fingers. "Because I get to be the one you unfold for." That night they didn't make love. They held each other like was enough because it was for now. And when Juliet fell asleep with her head on Elena's chest, Elena stared at the ceiling, heartful, knowing this was real. Messy, fragile, but real, and that scared her more than anything. The morning sunlight spilled across the bed in slow golden waves. Elena blinked awake, the unfamiliar softness of silk sheets beneath her, and Juliet's body curled gently against her back. For a moment, she didn't move. Just let herself exist in the quiet of that morning, her skin still humming from the feel of being held through the night. Juliet stirred behind her, a soft inhale brushing against Elena's neck. You're awake, Juliet murmured, her voice sleep rough and tender. Barely. Elena smiled, her fingers moving instinctively to cover the hand resting on her waist. Do you always look this peaceful when you sleep? Juliet chuckled, low and warm. Only when you're next to me. Elena turned slowly to face her, their noses nearly touching now. You always say the perfect thing, she whispered. No, Juliet said, brushing a thumb across her cheek. I just finally have someone I want to say it to. There was something new in the air that morning. Not urgency, not lust, but contentment, quiet, grounding, impossible to fake. Let me make you breakfast, Juliet offered, stretching. Do I get to live dangerously again? I bought croissants. No risk of poisoning this time. They ended up in the kitchen, still in their pajamas, barefoot with the windows open and a playlist humming gently from the speakers. Juliet poured coffee. Elena fed Noah's fish, who she learned was named Galileo. It felt like something out of a dream. Casual, domestic, effortless, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. You know, Juliet said, handing Elena a mug, I have a gala next weekend. Something obnoxiously formal. You'd look terrifyingly beautiful in a dress. Would you come with me? Elena blinked. Are you introducing me? Juliet's face softened. I want you there. I want people to see you with me. Even if they don't know what we are yet, I do. Elena's chest swelled with something bright and wild. Then, yes, I'll be there. Juliet smiled like that answer meant more than she could say. Later that day, after Elena went home to shower and change, Juliet sent her a message. Don't make plans Saturday night. Dress code dreamy. Elena replied, You'll regret giving me the freedom to interpret that. Juliet, I doubt I'll regret anything about you. Saturday came fast. Elena stood in front of her mirror, nervous energy buzzing through her veins. The dress she'd chosen was a deep emerald, hugging her in all the right places. Her hair pinned up with just a few soft strands framing her face. She didn't feel like herself. She felt like the version Juliet saw when she looked at her, and that was intoxicating. Juliet's driver picked her up. The car pulled up to a mansion she'd only seen in magazines, all glass and light and quiet elegance. And then Juliet walked out the front door in a midnight blue gown. Her hair slipped back, a diamond glinting at her throat. She stopped when she saw Elena. You, her voice faltered. You're unreal. Elena smirked, stepping out. You clean up all right, too. I might be in trouble tonight. Why is that? Because I already want to skip the gala and just dance with you in the garden. The night was a blur of soft lights, champagne, and whispered glances. Elena watched Juliet navigate the room with grace and power. But every time their eyes met, it felt like the world shrank to just the two of them. When the music changed to something slower, Juliet appeared at Elena's side. Dance with me. People are watching. What them? They danced in the middle of a crowd, slow and close. Juliet's hands firm at Elena's waist, their foreheads touching, their bodies moving like they were meant to fit. I could fall in love with you, Juliet whispered. Elena's heart skipped. Elena leaned in, her lips brushing Juliet's ear, then don't stop. That night, under the stars, they danced like no one else existed. And for the first time in years, Elena didn't feel like she was on the outside of something beautiful. She was inside it, and it felt like home. Elena hadn't planned to fall in love. Not like this, not this fast. But in the days after the gala, something shifted between them, something permanent. Juliet started sending flowers to her bookstore. Not elaborate bouquets, but single-stem roses or soft wildflowers, always with a note in Juliet's unmistakably elegant handwriting. For the woman who makes my heart quieter, or still thinking about your smile from last night. Elena started leaving. Toothbrushes and scarves at Juliet's house without thinking. Noah began running to hug her when she walked in the door. Even the staff, quiet and discreet, started addressing her with gentle familiarity. They were blending without force without declaration. They were just becoming. But love, real love never comes without its shadows. It started with a phone call. Elena was shelving new arrivals at the bookstore when she heard her name shouted across the room. Her coworker handed her the cordless phone wide. "It's someone named Claude Mercier," she said. Elena's stomach twisted. She brought the phone to her ear slowly. "Hello, you're Elena." The man's voice was clipped cold. "Yes, Juliet's father." "Oh." The pause stretched. "She's not here. I'm aware. That's why I'm calling you." Elena didn't respond. "My daughter doesn't think clearly when she's infatuated. But I do. You're not the kind of person who belongs in our life. You may have tricked her into thinking otherwise, but I assure you this won't last. I've watched her destroy better things than you." "You don't know me," Elena said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "And you don't know her. I know exactly who she is and what she needs. Whatever this is, it's temporary. Be smart enough to end it before she does." The line went dead. Elena stood frozen, heart pounding, the phone still pressed to her ear. That night, she didn't go to Juliet's house. She didn't call. She didn't answer Juliet's texts. She needed space to breathe, to think, to stop the panic that now pulsed behind her ribs. The next day, Juliet stormed into the bookstore just after closing. "You've been avoiding me." Elena swallowed hard. "Your father called me." Juliet's face went pale then sharp. "What did he say?" "Enough. Why didn't you tell me right away?" "Because I didn't want to believe he mattered, but he got under my skin." "Juliet, he said things that I've been too afraid to admit out loud." Juliet stepped closer. "Like what?" "Like maybe this is too much for someone like me, but I'll always be out of place in your world. That you'll wake up and realize I don't fit." Juliet's voice trembled. "Don't say that. I'm trying to be honest." "Then let me be honest too," Juliet said, her hands reaching for Elena's. "I've spent my whole life around people who fit perfectly into my world, and they never made me feel anything. You walk into a room and suddenly I can breathe. You make me feel human again. Elena, I don't want perfect." "I want you?" Elena blinked back the heat in her eyes. "Then why does it feel like the rest of your world is trying to erase me?" Juliet's hands tightened. "Because they're afraid of what they can't control. But I'm not. Aren't you?" Elena whispered. "You hide things. You freeze when you're scared. You pull away before I can even ask you what's wrong." Juliet stepped back, wounded. "I'm trying." "I know," Elena said softly. "So, am I?" There was silence, long ache. Then Juliet spoke, voice barely audible. "Please don't leave." "I don't want to," Elena whispered, "but I need to know that you'll fight for this too. Not just against your father, against yourself." Juliet looked like she wanted to argue, then she just deflated. "I've spent years building walls so no one could see how lonely I really was. And then you walked in and made a home out of me. I don't know how to protect that. I don't know how to be soft without falling apart." "Then fall apart," Elena said, stepping forward. "I'm right here." Juliet broke then, not loudly, but fully. She wrapped her arms around Elena and buried her face in her neck, letting herself be. Held like she'd never allowed before. And Elena held her like she meant it, like she wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Juliet hadn't let go of Elena all night. Even after the tears stopped, even after the silence settled between them like a second skin, she kept her arms wrapped around her like she was afraid Elena might vanish if she loosened. Her grip? Elena had never seen her like that. Unguarded, fragile, utterly real. And in that brokenness, Juliet was more beautiful than she'd ever been. The next morning, Juliet made tea with trembling hands while Elena sat at the counter, watching. Her in quiet reflection. "You know," Juliet finally said, "I've always been good at power, at control, but with you I don't want to win. I just want to stay." Elena smiled softly. "Then stop playing like you have to prove something. I'm not here to be impressed. I'm here to be with you." Juliet met her eyes and something settled in her shoulders. A quiet exhale of relief. She walked around the counter, placed a mug in front of Elena, and then kissed her forehead so gently it felt like a vow. Come away with me this weekend. Elena blinked. What? Just us? No staff, no pressure, somewhere quiet. I want to give you a memory that doesn't involve anyone's judgment. Just you and me. Where would we go? A lake house I haven't been to in years. It's about 3 hours away, secluded, peaceful. You'll love it. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'm yours. The words hung between them like a promise. And Juliet reached out, tracing the side of Elena's neck with a tenderness that made her shiver. Don't say that unless you mean it. Elena leaned into the touch. I've never met anything more. They left Friday afternoon. The drive was long and slow, filled with stolen glances, soft music, and fingers brushing on the center console. Juliet drove like she had nowhere to be, like the journey mattered more than the destination. When they arrived, the sun was setting, casting the lake in gold and rose. The house was quiet, wrapped in trees with a porch that faced the water and creaked when they stepped onto it. This is beautiful, Elena breathed. Not as beautiful as the way you're looking at it, Juliet said, unlocking the door. Inside, it smelled like cedar and old books. There was a fireplace, thick blankets, wine on the counter. Elena dropped her bag and turned to her. Are we really alone? Juliet smiled. Just us. That night, they curled up in front of the fire, legs tangled, wine half forgotten on the coffee table. Juliet had her head in Elena's lap, her fingers tracing circles on her thigh. You scare me, she admitted. Why? Elena asked, brushing hair from her forehead. Because this feels like the beginning of forever, and I don't know what to do with that. Elena bent down and kissed her gently. You don't have to know. We'll figure it out together. They made love for the first time slowly, quietly, not in a rush of bodies, but in the rhythm of something sacred. There was no performance, no urgency, just the reverence of hands learning skin, of lips memorizing sighs, of two women choosing each other again and again in the silence between heartbeats. Later, Juliet rested her head on Elena's chest, fingers drawing soft patterns on her ribs. I've never felt this safe, she whispered. Elena kissed the top of her head. You are with me. You are. The next morning, they made pancakes in their underwear, danced barefoot to old songs, kissed in the kitchen like the world wasn't watching, because for once, it wasn't. Juliet lifted her on the counter, made laugh, kissed her breathless, and whispered, I don't care about perfect days. I just want more of this. And Elena smiled, her eyes soft. Then let's promise to protect it. Whatever this is we fight for. Juliet nodded, her forehead pressed to Elena's. No more running from you, from myself, from love. For the first time, the word didn't feel heavy between them. It felt inevitable. The lake still shimmered in Elena's memory 2 days later, but the quiet peace they'd shared had started to shift into something heavier. Not colder, just more real. Returning to the city brought the noise back. Expectations, deadlines, responsibilities. Juliet went straight into meetings the moment they got home. Elena reopened the bookstore, behind on orders and emails. Life, impatient and unrelenting, pushed its way between them. They still talked, still texted, but the rhythm had changed. It was Wednesday when Elena sat across from Juliet at a rooftop restaurant. Both of them freshly dressed, candles flickering between them, wine glasses half full. But the air between them wasn't as easy as before. You're quiet tonight, Juliet said softly. Elena shrugged. So are you. Juliet looked away, then back. I've missed you. I'm right here. No, Juliet murmured. You're not all the way. Elena lowered her gaze. Neither are you. A pause, not tense, just full of truth. Is this the part? Juliet asked quietly. Where we start to drift without meaning. 2? Elena's chest tightened. Do you want it to be? No, God, no. Juliet reached across the table, her hand curling over Elena's. I want to anchor us, but I don't know how when everything outside of us keeps demanding pieces of me. Then let's take one back, Elena said. Let's stop just for a night. Just for... U.S. Juliet blinked. What do you mean? I mean, let's not be anyone tonight. Not the billionaire. Not the bookseller, not the mother, not the woman holding her breath. Let's just be us. Juliet smiled slow and warm. What are you proposing? A night where we celebrate us. Nothing else, no phones, no responsibilities, just us and every reason. Why we started this in the first place. So what does that look like? Juliet asked. Elena leaned in. Trust me. That night, Juliet arrived at Elena's apartment just after 8. No makeup, hair tied back, wearing jeans and a hoodie. Elena opened the door in sweatpants and bare feet, smiling like she hadn't all week. Inside, she lit candles all over the living room, soft music playing, and on the coffee table sat a bottle of wine, takeout from their favorite little Thai place, and a list. Juliet picked up the paper, brow arched. What's this? A game, Elena said. Things we love about us. We take turns. You say something, I say something. No repeats, no interruptions. Just us. Remembering why this matters. Juliet stared at the page, then looked up. You're ridiculous, and you love it. Juliet grinned. I do. They sat cross-legged on the couch, faces inches apart, and started. I love how you make coffee with way too much cinnamon, Juliet began. I love how you kiss the corner of my mouth when... You're distracted, Elena replied. I love that you cry during movies, even when you try to hide it. I love how you talk to books like they can hear you. I love how you touch me like you're memorizing me. I love that I still get nervous before seeing you. I love that I don't have to perform with you. I love that you don't run away from the mess in me. The list kept growing until their voices were hushed and their touches were slower in the food. Set forgotten until they were lying on the floor, fingers intertwined, heads resting on the same pillow. I don't want to lose this, Juliet whispered. Elena turned to her. Then we don't. Juliet looked at her, eyes glossy. Do you ever think about the future all the time? With me? Only with you? Juliet leaned in, kissed her like the words had landed too deep to speak. Tell me something romantic, she whispered. Elena smiled, brushing her lips against Juliet's. I would choose you in every life and every version of this world, even if you didn't choose me back. Juliet inhaled shakily. Don't say things like that unless you mean them. I've never meant anything more. That night, they didn't fall apart. They fell deeper. And for the first time in days, Elena stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because in that small apartment, surrounded by candlelight and laughter, and words they didn't say often enough, they remembered what they were fighting for, and for now that was everything. Juliet watched Elaine asleep. Her head was buried in the pillow, her mouth slightly parted, her back rising and falling with each peaceful breath. The light from the window painted her skin in soft gold, and Juliet couldn't stop looking at her, like she might disappear if she blinked too long. Something inside her had shifted after that night. It wasn't just affection anymore. It wasn't even the fierce, aching desire. It was deeper than that, a knowing, an ache laced with joy. Love had become a fact, and facts demanded reckoning. Later, that morning after breakfast and tangled kisses on the kitchen counter, Juliet sat on the edge of the bed, twisting the ring on her finger. There's something I need to tell you, she said, voice too even to sound casual. Elena, still in one of Juliet's oversized shirts, turned to her. What is it? Juliet didn't look at her. Noah's father reached out, silence heavy still. After all this time, Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He wants to meet Noah. He says he's changed, that he's ready, and you? Juliet finally looked up. I don't know. I don't trust him, but I also don't know what I'm allowed to do anymore legally. Emotionally, for Noah, Elena crossed the room and sat beside her. You're his mother. That gives you the right to protect him however you need. Juliet nodded slowly. But part of me wonders if I say no, Is that fear speaking or love? It can be both. And if I let him in and Noah gets hurt again, then you'll be there to catch him. Juliet leaned into Elena, resting her forehead against her shoulder. I hate this. I hate how one call from a man who never loved us properly can shake the ground I've been trying to build for years. Elena wrapped her arms around her, grounding her. Then let's rebuild it stronger together. Later that week, Juliet met with her lawyer. Elena waited in the car outside, fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. She didn't ask to go in. She didn't push. She simply waited, her presence a quiet act of support. When Juliet came out, she looked composed, but her eyes gave her away. He wants supervised visitation, she said, sliding into the passenger seat. He wants to prove himself, and the court will likely allow it. Okay, Elena said, so we adapt. Juliet turned to her. You say that like it's easy. It's not, but love isn't about easy. It's about showing up, especially when everything feels uncertain. Juliet reached for her hand, held it tight. Thank you for not disappearing. I'm not going anywhere, and Elena meant it. But that night, alone in her apartment, doubt crept in. She wasn't Noah's parent. She wasn't part of the family legally or officially. She was the woman Juliet loved. But what did that mean if Juliet had to fight a battle that Elena could only watch from the sidelines? That fear of being temporary, wrapped around her like cold wire. And it only grew when a few days later, Juliet canceled dinner, then again the next day, then went silent for a night. Elena didn't panic. She waited until Saturday morning when Juliet showed up at her door. Eyes red-rimmed, body tense. I didn't mean to pull away, she said the moment Elena opened the door. Then why did you? Because I've never had anything this good, and I keep waiting for the world to ruin it. Elena let her in, closed the door behind her. You don't get to do this alone, Juliet. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to let me stand beside you. You say that now. And I'll keep saying it until you believe me. Juliet stepped forward, pressed her forehead to Elena's. Do you believe in soulmates? I didn't not until you. Then help me believe we'll survive this. We already are, Elena whispered. Every day we choose each other. We survive a little more. And in that small apartment in the middle of fear and hope and exhaustion, they held each other like lifelines. Because sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet persistence, a steady hand, a soft promise. I'm still here. Juliet sat in the back seat of her car, parked just outside the family center where Noah's first supervised visit was scheduled to happen. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the strap on his backpack, even though it was already perfectly aligned on his shoulders. Noah looked up at her with calm, trusting eyes. He didn't seem scared, only curious. Are you coming inside with me? He asked. Juliet bent down, brushing a piece of hair from his forehead. I'll be right outside the room, baby. They just want to make sure you two talk first, okay? I'll be close always. He nodded and held her hand tight. When the staff came out to guide him in, he didn't cry. He looked back only once, and Juliet smiled through the burn in her throat. She didn't move until the door closed. Then she sat back down, her entire body tense, her heart racing like she'd sent him into battle. Elena arrived 10 minutes later. Out of breath, cheeks pink from the cold, she sat beside Juliet without speaking, simply reaching for her hand. Juliet gripped it hard. I didn't want to do this alone, she said quietly. You never have to, Elena whispered, bringing their joint. Hands to her lips. How long is the visit? 4 minutes. Then we wait together. They didn't fill the silence with small talk. It wasn't that kind of quiet. It was shared, protective, sacred. Elena occasionally glanced at Juliet, catching the wish she bit the inside of her cheek or blinked too fast. Do you want to talk about him? She asked gently. Juliet shook her head. Not yet. Not until I know Noah's okay. When the door opened again and Noah walked out calmly, holding a small toy dinosaur, Juliet stood up so fast the chair scraped. The floor. Noah smiled. He gave me this, he said, holding it up. Juliet crouched down. How do you feel? Weird, he said, thoughtful. But okay. She hugged him tight, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. I'm proud of you. Elena watched them quietly, heart clenching at the tenderness between them. Later at Juliet's house, Noah was upstairs and the fireplace crackled in the living room where Elena and Juliet sat curled up on the couch. He was fine, Juliet said, finally allowing herself to relax. Braver than I've ever been. He's brave because of you, Elena murmured. Because he's loved. Juliet looked over at her. Something deep and vulnerable in her eyes. You always say the right thing. Because I mean it. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You chose me, Elena said softly. Again and again, and I chose you back. Juliet turned, brushing a kiss over her cheek. Stay night. Elena smiled. Always. That night wrapped in blankets and each other. Juliet whispered in the dark. I used to believe love had to be earned. That it came with a price. Elena touched her face. You're wrong. I know. You got me. The next morning, Elena woke up to the smell of cinnamon and coffee. She walked into the kitchen to find Julia at the stove in one of her sweaters, humming. Softly, are you cooking for me again? Elena asked, arms crossing as she leaned on the doorframe. Juliet turned, grinning. Technically, I'm reheating. Baby steps. Elena walked over, wrapped her arms around her waist from behind, and pressed a kiss to her shoulder. You look happy. I am, even with everything. Because of everything. Because it's real. Because it's not perfect, but it's mine. You're mine. Elena turned her around and kissed her fully, deeply, slowly. I love you, she whispered against her lips. Juliet froze for a second, as if letting the words sink through every wall. Then she smiled wide and full. The kind of smile that only belonged. To Elena now, I love you too. They stood like that for a long time. No rush, no fear. Just love. Simple, powerful, undeniable. Juliet didn't sleep well that night, even with Elena curled against her chest. Love, even when mutual, even when spoken aloud, didn't silence every fear. It just gave it a softer place to land. The next morning, she stood in the garden behind her house, barefoot in the grass, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. The world felt still, but inside her something buzzed, restless and uncertain. Elena stepped out, her hair still messy from sleep, pulling Juliet's robe tighter around herself. You disappeared, she said gently, voice still husky. Couldn't sleep, Juliet admitted. You okay? I think I want full custody of Noah. Elena blinked, the words hitting with quiet weight. You hadn't said that out loud yet. I know, I hadn't let myself. Juliet turned to her, but watching him walk out of that room yesterday with that dinosaur in his hand. God, Elena, it gutted me, not because he was hurt. He wasn't, but because it reminded me how fragile this all is. One judge, one decision, one man I've spent years protecting him from, and everything we've built could be compromised. Elena walked over and touched her arm. Then you fight. It won't be pretty. I'm not here for pretty, Julia exhaled. I've spent years being composed, strategic, careful. But I don't want to be careful anymore. I want to be fierce about the things that matter. Noah, you. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now, Juliet said, I call my lawyer and I stop letting the past dictate the future. That same afternoon, Juliet met with her legal team. The fight for sole custody would be difficult, messy, public, possibly, but she no longer cared about optics. She cared about Noah, about their safety, about protecting what they built. When she returned home, she found Elena in the garden with Noah, showing him how to plant lavender in one of the terracotta pots. His tiny hands were covered in soil, his face bright with laughter, and Juliet froze, not out of fear, out of awe. Because in that moment, watching the two people she loved more than anything in the world, kneeling side by side, She saw the life she wanted. Not the curated perfection she once thought love had to be, but the chaotic, beautiful truth of what it could become. That evening, she cooked actual food, not just warmed up leftovers. She poured wine, lit candles, put music on low. "This feels like a setup," Elena said, amused as she walked into the dining room. "A setup for what?" Juliet teased. "Are you going to ask me something scandalous? Would you say yes if I did?" "Depends on the scandal." Juliet poured her a glass and pulled her close by the waist. "Do you want to move in with me?" The words came out, softer than she intended, but their weight landed like thunder. Elena's eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Not right away. Not out of obligation, but I've been thinking about the life I want. And you're in it always. Noah adores you. You make this house feel like a home. You make me feel like I'm allowed to dream about things I used to think I'd never have." Elena didn't answer right away. She just stared at her, heart racing. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Elena stepped closer, wrapped her arms around her forehead to forehead. "Then yes. Eventually when it feels right. I want that too." Juliet kissed her with a kind of relief. She didn't know she was holding. "Well, go slow," she whispered. "But we'll go together." The next few days unfolded with surprising calm. Noah had another visit, and though Juliet hated every second of it, he came back happy and whole. Her lawyer moved forward with the paperwork. Elena started staying more nights than not. They fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously like a life. One night, as they lay in bed, limbs tangled under warm sheets, Juliet whispered, "Do you ever worry this is too good to last?" Elena was quiet for a moment sometimes, but then I remembered that I've survived worse, and that if we fall, we fall. Together, Juliet turned to her, brushed her fingers down her spine. "If you fall, I catch you always." "And if you break?" Elena asked. "Then I let you see all the pieces," Juliet whispered. "And trust that you'll still love me." Elena leaned in, kissing her slow and deep. "I will." In every version of the future they imagined, love was no longer a fragile hope. It was a decision they made every day, every night, even in fear. Especially in fear. The storm arrived without warning, not in the sky, but in the courtroom. Juliet sat at the long oak table, her fingers tightly clasped in her lap, shoulders squared, face calm, but only on the surface. Across from her sat Noah's father, smug in his tailored suit, flanked by a lawyer with a voice like polished steel. Elena was in the back row of the courtroom, her presence a silent anchor. She hadn't tried to speak when Juliet walked in. She'd only stood and met her eyes, the kind of look that said, "You're not alone." No matter what happens, the hearing started with formalities. Then came the character witnesses. Then the statements. Juliet had been prepared for all of it. Her lawyer had warned her, but nothing prepared her for the moment Noah's father looked the judge in the eye and said, "She's unstable, controlling. She doesn't let me see my son because she's possessive, not because I'm dangerous." And now she's moved another woman into his life. A woman with no legal ties to him, no say in his upbringing. What kind of example is that for a little boy? The courtroom went cold. The words hung in the air like poison. Juliet's throat burned. Her lawyer objected, of course, but the damage had been done. Not because it was true, but because it planted doubt. After the hearing, Juliet walked out without a word. Elena followed her into the hallway where she stood against the wall, breathing too fast. "Say something," Juliet whispered. Elena stepped closer. "What do you want me to say? That you're okay? That you're not rethinking everything?" "I'm not," Elena said, voice steady. "I expected worse. And I don't care what anyone says in a courtroom. We know what this is. I brought you into this," Juliet said. "I made you a target. You made me a part of your life," Elena corrected. "And I won't pretend I'm not furious, but I'm not scared. Not of him, not of what people think. I'm here for you. For Noah." Juliet closed her eyes, leaning forward until her forehead met Elena's. I'm so tired. Then let me be strong for both of us today, Elena whispered. You don't have to carry this alone. That night, they didn't speak much. Juliet showered in silence. Elena made tea, and Noah fell asleep with his head in Elena's lap, thumb hooked around her sweater. It wasn't until well after midnight that Juliet finally spoke. What if I lose? Elena looked up. You won't, but if I do, will you still stay? Elena's answer was instant. There isn't a version of this where I don't stay. Even if things get worse, especially then. Juliet swallowed hard. Do you know what you are to me? Tell me. You're the place I go when I'm tired of being strong. Elena crawled across the bed, took Juliet's face in her hands, and kissed her slow. Then rest. Just rest. I'm not going anywhere. A few days later, Juliet got a call. The judge had ordered a temporary delay in decision, another hearing, more mediation. It meant more uncertainty, more waiting. And yet, she didn't break. She didn't unravel. Not this time. Because Elena was there for every meeting, every night, every single ache. To distract her, Elena planned a quiet evening. No legal talk, no tension. She cooked badly, but Juliet still laughed and ate every burnt bite. After dinner, they slow danced barefoot in the living room to music from Elena's playlist. The song soft and nostalgic, full of longing. I didn't know I could feel this close to someone, Juliet whispered, her head resting on Elena's shoulder. Like, we're living the same heartbeat. We are, Elena said, even when we're scared. Juliet pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Will you marry me someday? Elena blinked, breath-catching. Someday? Not now, Juliet said. Not during a custody battle. Not while the world is loud. But one day when it's quiet again, when we've survived it all. Elena smiled, her voice cracking. Then yes, I will. They didn't need a ring or a grand gesture. Just a promise in the dark. A vow whispered skin to skin, and as they kissed beneath, the soft hum of music and candlelight, they both knew this wasn't the end of the fight. But it was the beginning of their forever. The final stages of the custody case moved like a slow, grinding machine. Paperwork, hearings, interviews, evaluations. Every day felt like waiting to exhale. Juliet, once master of control, began waking in the middle of the night, panicked, breathless, reaching across the bed for Elena's hand like it was the only solid thing in her world. And Elena, unwavering, always reached back. One Tuesday morning, Juliet found herself in a small office with a court-appointed child psychologist, watching through a one-way mirror as Noah sat in a room filled with toys and soft lighting. The doctor had told Juliet she wouldn't be able to speak to him during the observation. We're looking at attachment, comfort, natural responses, he'd said. Juliet sat in silence, knees crossed tightly, fingers pressed together in her lap, and she watched her son choose the stuffed lion over the robot, watched him build a tower out of wooden blocks, watched him laugh softly when the blocks tumbled. Then came the question, who makes you feel safe? The psychologist asked. Noah didn't pause. My mom. Anyone else? Elena, he said. The name came out with total confidence. Juliet's hand flew to her mouth. And why, Elena? She helps my mom. Breathe better, Noah said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She makes pancakes when my mom's too tired. She reads with funny voices. She never makes me feel small. Juliet's vision blurred. She felt the psychologist glance at her from the corner of his eye, but she didn't care. All she could hear was Noah's voice echoing in her chest like a miracle. That night, she told Elena everything. They were sitting on the floor, wine glasses balanced on the coffee table, Noah asleep upstairs. Juliet couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop crying. He didn't even blink, she said. He said your name like you're part of his bones. Elena just sat there listening, her eyes glassy. I didn't know you felt that way. He loves you. I love him and I love you, Juliet said, her voice low. I know I've said it, but I want you to understand. I don't love you like a chapter. I love you like a whole book, a life. Elena leaned over and kissed her deep and sure. Then let's keep writing. A few days later, they received the court's decision. Full custody granted to Juliet Mercier. No shared agreement, no visitation schedule. Noah's father had failed to prove stability, and the court had agreed that disrupting the child's current emotional environment would do more harm than good. The relief was total, but not loud. There were no cheers, no champagne, just quiet tears. Just Juliet falling into Elena's arms in the hallway outside the courthouse and whispering, "We're safe now." That evening, Elena planned something. She didn't tell Juliet what, just said, "Be ready at 7." When Juliet walked into the room at the back of the bookstore, she stopped in her tracks. Candles flickered across every surface. A low melody played from a vintage speaker. And in the center of the room, a table for two. "You turned the back room into a restaurant?" Juliet asked, stunned. Elena stepped out from behind the curtain. Wearing a simple black dress, barefoot, smiling like she had the entire universe in her chest. "Only for tonight. What's the occasion?" "You won," Elena said. "You got him back, you protected your heart, and you never gave up." "We won," Juliet whispered. And this Elena took her hand and placed it over her own heart. "This is me keeping my promise. Celebrating us even when the world's not watching." They ate pasta and drank wine and laughed too hard. At one point, Juliet stood and pulled Elena into a slow dance between the shelves. "You realize I fell in love with you in this bookstore." "Right," Juliet murmured. "You fell in love with me while I had my hair in a messy bun and ink on my hands," Elena teased. "Exactly. No one's ever looked more beautiful covered in dust and sarcasm." "You're such a sap," Elena whispered, but her voice trembled with emotion. Juliet kissed her like they had all the time in the world, like there was nothing left to fear. "We have a family now," Juliet whispered against her lips. "You, me, Noah. Do you realize what we've made?" "We didn't make it," Elena said softly. "We chose it every day through everything." They danced until the candles burned low, until the city outside went quiet, until Juliet held Elena close and whispered, "This is what home feels like." And Elena, her cheek resting against the woman she never thought she'd find, whispered back, "I know." It had been 2 weeks since the court's decision, and in many ways, things had never felt more stable. Noah was thriving, laughing more, sleeping better, asking questions that made Juliet both proud and exhausted. Elena had started leaving clothes. In Juliet's closet, her toothbrush next to hers in the bathroom. They shared mornings sleepy and tangled and evenings filled with quiet routines that had begun to feel sacred. And yet, as often happens when the storm finally passes, the stillness that followed brought its own weight. One night, Elena stood by the window in Juliet's bedroom, watching the rain streak the glass. Her arms were crossed, her mind clearly elsewhere. Juliet stepped behind her, wrapping her arms around Elena's waist and resting her chin on her shoulder. "You're quiet again," she said. Elena didn't answer immediately. "It's nothing. That's never true with you." Elena exhaled, leaning back slightly into her. "I was just thinking about how easy it is to lose something you love." Juliet tightened her arms. "You're not going to lose this. You're not going to lose me." "I know," Elena said. "But when things finally feel real, when they feel permanent, it's almost worse because now I can see what I have, and the idea of losing. It's unbearable." Juliet turned her gently, cupping her face. "That fear means it matters. But fear doesn't get to make the decisions anymore." "We do." Elena searched her eyes like she was looking for something to hold on to. "Promise me you won't disappear. Even if we get tired, even if things get complicated. I promise," Juliet whispered. "But I need the same from you. You're strong, Elena. So strong you sometimes forget how to lean on people. Don't shut me out when it's your turn to be held." Elena nodded, blinking fast. "Okay, I won't." They kissed slow, deep, affirming. A few days later, Juliet invited Elena and Noah to a weekend to her family's coastal property. An old house with creaky floorboards, ivy-covered walls, and a view. of the ocean so wide it made the sky feel small. Juliet hadn't been there in years. The last time she visited, she'd been pregnant and terrified. Now she walked through those rooms, holding Elena's hand and watching Noah run barefoot across the wooden floors like he belonged there. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep in the guest room and the wind had picked up outside, Juliet took Elena out to the balcony. "You ever think about what it means to belong?" Juliet asked, her voice barely louder than the waves crashing below. Elena wrapped her arms around herself all the time. "I used to think I didn't anywhere, not really. Even this house, it always felt like something I was borrowing, not something that was mine." She turned to Elena. "But you make places feel like home. You walk into a room and it becomes safer. And when I look at you and Noah together, it doesn't feel borrowed anymore. It feels earned." Elena stepped closer, her voice unsteady. "You know, I've never had a family. Not a real one. Not one that chose me. We choose you," Juliet said. "Every single day." "Then let me do something terrifying," Elena said, reaching into the pocket of her coat. She pulled out a small velvet box and held it between them. "This was supposed to be for later, for someday. But I don't want to wait for a perfect moment anymore because this is already the most real thing I've ever had." Juliet stared at the box, then at Elena, completely still. Elena opened it slowly, revealing a simple silver ring, elegant, timeless, with a small emerald at its center. "I know we're not rushing into anything. I know we said someday, but I want to give you something to hold on to. Something that says I'm not going anywhere." Juliet's eyes filled instantly. She took the box, stared at the ring, then at Elena again. "I've never been proposed to," she said, voice trembling. "Not really. Then let me be your first and your last." Juliet reached for her face, kissed her with such tenderness, it felt like the world around them disappeared. "Put it on me," she whispered. Elena slid the ring onto her finger, hands shaking, heart pounding. Juliet looked down at her hand, then back at Elena. "You've made me brave," she said. "And I want the rest of my life to be a love letter to the way you saved me." They held each other as the wind howled and the ocean raged below, their bodies pressed together, their foreheads touching, breath mingling in the dark. That night, they didn't sleep much. They stayed wrapped in each other, whispering future plans in the dark, where they'd live, what kind of flowers they wanted at the wedding, the kind of life they'd build with Noah. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming, but it was theirs. And in the quiet of that old house by the sea, the love they had chosen again and again finally bloomed into something unshakable. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It wasn't held in a cathedral or some five-star ballroom with crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. Juliet could have had all of that if she wanted. Every door in the city would have opened for her with a phone call. But she didn't want the world. She just wanted Elena, and Elena didn't want spectacle. She wanted meaning, so they chose the garden behind the bookstore, transformed over the course of 3 weeks with string lights. Soft white linens and flowers and every imaginable shade of green and violet. Juliet had brought in a small team to help, but the final details like the handwritten name tags, the lavender sprigs tied with ribbon, the photo of Elena's grandmother tucked into a little frame on the table, they'd done those together. It wasn't a grand event, but it was perfect. The ceremony was held just after sunset. Noah stood beside them in a little navy blue suit, proud and slightly fidgety, holding a velvet box with both hands. The garden smelled of jasmine and soft earth and everything in Juliet's life. Every hardship, every silence, every wrong turn suddenly made sense. It had led her here. Elena wore a simple cream dress, her hair down in soft waves. She had never looked more like herself, like home. When they faced each other, hands joined. The officiant gave them space to speak freely. And they did. Juliet went first. Her voice trembled, but not from nerves, just from how much she felt. "You walked into my life when I didn't even know I was missing something. You made space where there was none. You listened without judgment. You helped me when I didn't know I needed holding. And every day since you reminded me what it means to be seen, not for what I can do or give, but for who I am. I used to be afraid that love would make me weak. But with you, I've never felt stronger. Elena wiped her eyes, then spoke. I never believed in permanence. I never believed in forever. But the first time I looked into your eyes, something quiet in me whispered, stay. And every time I tried to push you away, every time I doubted, I came back to that same whisper. You're my safest place. You are the fire that warmed me when I was cold too long. You are the choice I will make every day. Without hesitation, without end, Noah stepped forward when the officiant called for the rings. His hands were steady and his eyes were shining. Elena bent down to him and whispered, You okay, buddy? He nodded. I'm really happy. She kissed his forehead. Me too. They exchanged rings as the stars began to rise. And when the words were finally said, when the world was told what their hearts already knew, Juliet kissed Elena like they had all the time in the world. And maybe now they did. The celebration after was quiet, joyful, full of laughter and music, and the clinking of glasses. At one point, Juliet pulled Elena into a slow dance in the middle of the courtyard while Noah played with his new camera nearby. We did it, Juliet whispered. You did it, Elena said, brushing a kiss under her jaw. You fought for this, for all of us. So did you. We made it, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. You realize that? We're just beginning, Juliet replied. That night, after everyone had gone, they stayed in the garden long after the candles burned low. Noah had fallen asleep curled on one of the cushioned benches. A blanket pulled over him, and the two of them sat side by side on a swing bench, holding hands in silence. The stars above them shimmered. Elena turned to Juliet and whispered, Tell me something romantic. Juliet smiled. You're the only home I've ever wanted. Elena leaned her head on her shoulder. You're the only place I've ever belonged. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Their story had been loud enough, full of fear and fire, softness and strength. But in the end, the love they built didn't need volume. It was quiet, steady, certain, and forever.